Hello everyone, I am Rashmi Mabian Kaur, Senior Correspondent at ETHealthworld.com. Welcome you in today's virtual roundtable on the future of clinical trials, challenges and opportunities. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has greatly impacted the healthcare segment. Emerging from the challenges of COVID-19, health and pharmaceutical organizations globally are innovating and digitally transforming clinical research analytics from getting trials up and running in the new normal to modernizing trial designs and delivering new therapies and vaccines faster. And doing all of this in a highly regulated landscape. Today, in this virtual roundtable, we will be discussing the challenges we faced and the lessons learned in the field of clinical trials and how technology adoption has affected the post pandemic world. I would now like to introduce our eminent panel members. Please welcome Anirban Roy Chowdhury, Vice President, Clinical Research and Pharmacovigilance at Bharat Serums and Vaccines Limited, Dr.
Thank you.
Ayaaz Hussain Khan, Global Head Generics at Navitas Life Sciences, Dr. Mukesh Kumar, Senior Vice President and Head Clinical R&D at Cipla, Dr. Ravi Kasibhatta, SVP and RD Head at Lupin Pharmaceuticals, Sumit Garg, Global CIO at Pharmaceuticals Pharma Solutions, and Mark Lambrecht, Director EMEA at APAC Health and Life Sciences at SAS. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So before going ahead, I would like to inform everyone that the panel discussion will be followed by a question and answer session. All attendees can share their questions in the chat window and our experts will be addressing them towards the end. So a very warm welcome to all the speakers. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, Rashmi, thanks.
Yeah, we are. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We're all good.
So my first question will be to Dr. Ayaaz. Since, according to you, has the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted the clinical trial process? And what challenges do you face, the opportunities that you think got created?
Yeah, Rashmi, first of all, thanks for the nice introduction. And I would also like to thank ET Health for picking up a very relevant topic for today's discussion. And I hope the audience get benefited with this. Yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic was, of course, unprecedented, and the situation impacted us, in fact, the entire clinical trial industry, widespread changes, and then the challenges that came across to us. If you look at the global data, the disruption that we are talking about, it's to the tune of the patient enrollment getting stopped to about 67%. And the delay in clinical trial initiations was about 18%. And of course, with slow patient enrollment, which contributed about 14%. Well, looking into all this, as you have asked about the challenges and opportunities, so let me frame it like this. I will bucket it under four categories as I move forward. But to begin with, safeguarding our health of our teams was very vital for us. And we did initiate the business continuity plan quickly when the pandemic struck. So to begin with, the first challenge I would throw across here is the patient access. So when we talk about patient access, patients were not able to reach hospitals, they were not able to continue the trials. That was the situation that we were given with. So we moved on in terms of online consultations, and we were also able to monitor the progress of the trial by kicking in our proprietary platform, which is called One Clinical. And this really, helped us in terms of remotely monitoring and also giving us, real-time inputs, because this platform is based and powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning. So that really, helped us. We did a lot of investment hindsight before we ended up in this, and we didn't know that pandemic was going to come in front of us. Of course, we also had to adopt for some home care visits, in case if there is any requirement. The second point I would like to put here across is the disruption of investigational products and the samples that we had to collect. When we were running these clinical trial studies. So what happened is that the medicinal products were not getting delivered because the patients didn't have access to the hospitals and to their centers. So what we did is that means we brainstormed about it. We came up with a lot of innovative, thinking, and we collaborated means very closely with each other, including the logistics. And we started doing a direct shipment of these products means to the homes of the patients, and that way means we are able to continue the patients means in the studies. Of course, we also brought in telemedicine and other improvements means as we move forward, and all this was with consultation of the medical investigator means who was involved in these trials. So the third point I would like to put in here is the patient safety. Patient safety is very, very important, and then we do a medical monitoring means of these patients. So again, means in this, our one clinical platform means came in handy means for us, because this platform was designed by quality, and it actually gave us effective oversights, and we were able to use these oversights and then make into actionable insights. And this was a very comprehensive data visualization means that we were actually bringing in front of the investigators and the people who are handling these trials. So the result was means we had very less, or the I would say the source data verification actually got reduced because of enabling these one clinical platform means that we are able to do it. Having said that, I mean, in case of a requirement and a need, means we were able to quickly follow through with a home visit, and we were able to take care of the patient safety. The last one would be on the data collection. I mean, this was again a big challenge for us because all the data means was residing means either in the hospital or in the centers means where they were the patients were reporting into. So it became very vital for us, to pick up that data means from the hospital, and then to bring it up into the electronic medical records. Of course, means with the technology advancing, means we are able to come up with smart tablets, and also in some cases even mobiles means where we are able to get data through that. The other very critical point here is means in terms of the data, the transmission of data, and also the final data integrity, I mean, that we are talking about. So if you look at, I mean, FDA also has a guideline means on this, I mean, in terms of how we ensure that the data security is maintained. So overall means if you ask me, yes, I mean, we this pandemic has really changed the way we are now conducting trials. We are now into virtual clinical trials. Means we are now more into decentralized clinical trials, means which was not the norm earlier. So this pandemic did bring us all these challenges and we faced. You talked about opportunities, so let me quickly tell you that I mean we also did had good opportunities. I mean, on one side the pandemic kicking in, on the other side we also had some opportunities. The opportunities, of course, was for COVID. The best thing about these opportunities was that it means a very fast regulatory approvals, I mean, which we have never seen it in prior to this. And of course means we got opportunities to do phase 1 clinical trials means for COVID therapy, means it was a real purpose. I mean, the route of administration changed to intramuscular, and then we were able to quickly put that study together. And similarly, I mean, we were able to get many studies means for COVID as a treatment, as a therapy, and these were all again the products means that we are able to bring in both regional as well as global. So I would like to sum it up that I mean, yes, we had some losses, we had some gains, and it was overall a different experience that we had to went through.
Thank you, Dr. Ayaaz. Coming to you, Mr. Anirban, what is your perspective on this?
Sure. Thank you so much. I think Dr. Ayaaz has already kind of touched upon the challenges. I'm not getting into the challenges because he has already summarized it very well. Now, from the opportunities perspective, I'll point 2 or 3 things. One is that I mean, when actually COVID struck, I mean, I think immediately the medical fraternity's response was to immediately start certain clinical trials, either to understand the disease or to kind of find out vaccines and therapeutic agents. So that required tremendous speed, and that actually if you could see many innovative trial designs came into perspective. For example, the seamless adaptive design, the recovery study is one global example, but from an Indian perspective also, if you look at many of the vaccines that got approved, they all had adaptive consolidated protocols, which phase 1/2 or 2/3, so that you move from one phase to the other phase very, very fast. I think prior to this, I don't think at least in the Indian regulatory front, regulators were very open to this innovative design. But I think post or during COVID, they also they also started accepting this. Apart from approving studies very fast, which Dr. Ayaaz already mentioned about. I think they also helped in this. I mean, their acceptance of these designs actually helped in taking many things forward. Secondly, if you look at the ICMR guidelines, which came out in April 2020, that's particularly for the ethics committees, that for the first time mentioned about electronic consent, use of electronic consent. As of today, this is the only government issued or mention of adaptation of electronic media, especially electronic consent. And we believe that because that is the first step. I mean, already that acceptance, that acknowledgement has happened, so we probably move forward with these and further develop and adapt more technologies in future in clinical trials. And Dr. has already mentioned about the decentralization actually happened. We were forced to try certain decentralized approaches within the clinical trial space. But I'll also touch upon one of the challenges that we face. Since we had an opportunity to use e-consent, I tried to use e-consent in some of the studies that I did. But unfortunately, there are no e-consent providers in India. We have to get this from US, and they are prohibitively expensive, and that is where I hope there are some tech folks in the audience. I mean, I think there is an opportunity where Indian tech groups can actually come up with e-consent solutions, which is cost effective and can be used in India in the future. So I'll end there and look forward to others' comments.
So coming to you, Dr. Ravi, your views on the same question.
Of course, I know both Dr. Ayaaz and Dr. Chowdhury given a very wonderful understanding on both the opportunities, of course, challenges there were. And when it comes to the challenges, and which we always need to get them converted for opportunities, because necessity is the mother of invention. So naturally, we got a lot of learning during this COVID pandemic situation. And what kind of learnings that I can say is on the forefronts. One is about being sponsored. What we need to really get up and make the things to change in the system, because the important point when it comes to the sponsor point side is continuity of the business and continuity of the clinical research and continuity of the medical research for the benefit of the mankind, especially when they were half the way through and we got the lockdowns and many other aspects come into picture, how to get them fast facing and how to get them resolved. First of all, getting the readiness internally is the biggest challenge. And naturally, like the platforms were not so very handy and user-friendly. So there were the stories like we did not have well equipped for kind of pandemic situation, and we faced a lot of struggle for non-COVID-19 CT studies, because that's where the crux come. Because during the period, no one could go out or no one could go and meet the people and especially the patient care. So the other one is about any tools that come into picture. It was time-taking process for the team, for the end users, and even for the patients to that matter, to get well-equipped to put hands on and get a show run. So that's another challenge which I always see, that readiness of the team internally and readiness of the different teams, stakeholders, and especially when it comes to the patient population, how they will get equipped, first of all, with the tools and devices that we can put with them, and how best they can get trained and how best they can come online and take these devices operations well acquainted for benefit of themselves and for the trial continuity. So that is another opportunity which I see where the challenges were not easy to overcome, but they were really given a good learning. And out of all other two systems which are very prominent to really make them to understand the way it has to happen is about CROs and their ethics committees, because CROs also not to the extent that we thought of get equipped well, because the investigation sites, investigators and the CRAs sitting locally in the investigation sites, and the CROs managing teams like project management teams or quality assurance teams and the monitors teams, everyone are not well equipped and cannot really move into the market or move into the investigation sites. So that is the biggest challenge, which took time for getting the approvals from the local administrations, because that's very, very difficult phase, which I can say local administration team cannot understand this as priority. When it comes to the COVID situation, COVID pandemic situation to be dealt first. And the entire population safety was the first challenge for the local bodies and government bodies, both state level and central level. So these are the main other aspects which we are connected for the third party or vendors getting acquainted. And the last one which I can say is about the movement of the investigational products or movement of the to the point of care, because now we started taking the standard of the care at the investigation sites to the point of care at the homes. So naturally, the kind of transfer of investigation products to get them delivered in a timely manner for the continuity of the trial. That's another biggest challenge, which also with the supply chain management and bringing the digitalization platforms and make the things to happen with a lot of changes, of course, which helped everyone to learn and grow. So what I see is this 2 years to 3 years of learning, though it was existing earlier, but this really given a lot of insight and deep diving for getting them bettered from different aspects, even without though we are not in a position to really go patient visits, not really go that HCP, that healthcare providers can go directly to the patient's place, many other aspects also. But we learned and we developed our technique of getting the continuity of the CT studies, especially non-COVID-19 CT studies, because COVID-19 patients at least could get reaching to the kind of hospitals and localized sites and easy to get them on, but not for non-COVID-19 studies. So that's a real challenge, but at the same time, good opportunity, I can say, for every aspect of these challenges to develop and get trained the guns for conducting the smooth conduct of the studies. That's what I can say right now.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Mr. Mukesh, would you like to briefly touch on the challenges and opportunities that you felt?
Thank you for this question. And I was listening to my esteemed peers talking about it. I think they have covered most of the things. Not much for me to say. I agree with them. But I want to focus on 4 things, right? And I want to focus on 4 things where the clinical trials were seen as an issue or issues in the clinical trials or the clinical development or drug development. One is cost. Second is time to development, related to speed. Third would be the real innovation, which requires information sharing. And I think pharma industry is known to have slow uptake of technology. So I think if we as a clinical development professionals, if I look at the experience of COVID, a tough time for us, I think this has shown us path for these 4 things. Let me take it one by one. Information sharing and collaboration. I think it was at its best, and you would have seen that a lot of universities working with pharma, a lot of even small startups working with the JVs. You would have seen the philanthropy group, they're coming forward and sponsoring some clinical trials. You would see, even regulators, right? where you have to wait for meeting, like in India, we know pre-COVID, we used to wait for meetings and then we go for meetings. But in COVID time, online meetings, I think every week, right? So I think I would say one thing is what COVID has shown, and I think to me, this is one of the most important thing, that how do we come together and how do we collaborate to solve the clinical problem, to make drug available faster and quicker. Now, post-COVID, what is happening? I think still we remember those days, but I don't think that speed, that collaborative spirit, it is sustained to the level it was. But I think it's still there. So I think we need to make sure somehow we don't lose on that, and we continue that collaboration, focusing on non-COVID diseases. This is one part. Second is speed, I think, right? I think speed, I think probably nobody has seen in our career how rapidly the drugs were approved, both remdesivir and also the COVID vaccines. And this was possible, again, I think I would again go back to the collaboration, right? Because everybody understood the problem and they know that we have to solve the problem. We were quick in action, and also we were quick in analyzing and taking decisions and finding solutions, right? And I think one of the items we'll be talking later on about the decentralized trial, right? Or I mean, real world data. Yes. And we know that those approval which has came, how it came, right? Slowly with limited data, and then we had the more data, right? So this is speed. I think now probably we should change the paradigm post-COVID, right? Earlier we were saying that in the clinical development you need to spend maybe 3 to 9 years. So can we talk in terms of months? This will be my aspirations. But for that, we have to sustain that spirit, that collaborations, and also maybe conversation with regulators. Second point. Third is, I think, on the cost of development. So speed, so we have been talking about the clinical trial, they cost for maybe hundreds of millions and things like that, right? And there are various tools of doing it. So we have seen that the trials were not that expensive. Because one is that some cost is reduced from those visits, etc. And then we have also seen good collaboration, right? Again, I'll come to that. And fourth is, I think, technology. The technology, I think that's scored also. I think the first one, the collaboration technology, were absolutely super and should sustain. So I think in DCGI in India also, we never did any, and at least I never did any meeting online, right? Using technology, but we were having those meetings with Indian regulators. When we're talking about outside India also, I think we were attending those meetings, by using Zoom or Microsoft or phone, right? So that was a big change I have seen. And I think linked to that is a fourth element, the decentralized trial, right? Which brings both speed and the cost efficiencies. I would say that it has shown some path when we have collected data remotely for non-COVID trials particularly. And also there is some progress, like I think Anirban mentioned about the e-consenting, right? So regulators have been faster than the technology available in India. I think probably for the first time. So for me, these are the few points, probably the good takeaway from these times. The momentum is not at the level where we want it to be, but I think we can sustain it. And I believe programs like this, what we are talking, they will again bring the momentum back, and probably we can benefit from the experience we had during COVID times.
Thank you, Dr. Mukesh. You highlighted really good points, but do you think the COVID pandemic has brought in more acceptance towards the real world data as compared to the data from these randomized clinical trials?
Very good. I think, what I would say, so one thing is, so acceptance is yes, for sure, right? So let me take in two parts. Acceptance for the COVID-related treatments and the non-COVID related treatments, the clinical trials. So I think it's visible. We know the remdesivir story. We know the vaccine story. The emphasis has been on the real world data. If my audience and my peer group, the panelists, they recall, remdesivir's approval was not based on the reduction in the mortality, right? That did not come from the approval trial. The approval trial was just about the shortening of the duration of hospitalization, right? But then what taken as a surrogate, and then from that surrogate, I think we said, okay, we are giving approval now. You go back and show the real world evidence, how it is doing in the real world. And I think many countries which have, those good databases like, health records, etc., they have published their reports, and that helped us, taking it forward. Point number one. So let me take a step back. This question I'm addressing in three parts. One is the regulator for the new drug development, and second is also the treatment guidances. I'll talk about that later on, right? So acceptance in the COVID area, and same is the story of vaccine also, right? And I think Anirban mentioned, and Dr. Ravi also mentioned that how they have got the approvals and the COVID vaccine. So COVID vaccine also we have got approval based on some clinical data, and the real world evidence is following up on that, and it's a great example. So to summarize, in the COVID, certainly it's a great example that what we have seen in the maybe small size clinical trials, randomized clinical trial, we trusted that, and then we gave a chance to to the companies to go to the real world and get that evidence, right? And of course, that has been point of discussion, that what is more solid, what is more robust, is the clinical trial data or the real world data. If I look back to this experience from that angle, so I think it supports the acceptance of real world data, right? Which has been different from some examples we had in I would say in other indications, right? So this was not the first time that regulators they accepted the real world data, but I think probably not at this scale. We have a few examples like I think one of drug, I think in the breast cancer in oncology we have some examples where this was accepted, but I think this was a solid example where I think the data was reliable and the real world has stood the test. So I think it should give acceptance. Going forward, what is going to happen? In my opinion, both are going to stay. Clinical trials are not going away. They will be there, right? And they'll be always, I think, the preferred choice of many, including regulator and also the pharma companies, right? But I think absolutely, I see a good opportunity for the more reliance on the real world data to shorten the approval timelines, right? This is how I look at it. Now, also, if you look at the experience also in the past, probably, so real world data is actually being relied upon. So regulators, physicians, the universities, the KOLs, the panels which make the treatment guidances, they have been relying on the treatment guidances. And my physician colleagues would know that your positioning of a drug not really the same always, which is said in the package insert. It can be different also in the guidance document is. And how they do it? They do it because there is real world data. They are seeing that how the drug is doing in the who is doing this, collecting this data. So mostly I think it was not by pharma industry, mostly it was outside that. Maybe we can see the more instances here that pharma industry can collect data. We have some countries where the records are good, basic requirements. They can go back to that records and collect that data. In next step, I think we have to strengthen the machinery also, not only in terms of collecting data at the sites, how we follow patients in the real world, but also in the pharma industries. I don't think clinical development, we have many epidemiologists, right? We know that. So that is also going to change. I think in coming days, that we rely more on the real world data. The talent pool and the type of talent pool we are having in pharma industry, I think that is going to change. So I'm sure that COVID trials, COVID approval, and the way we solve the problem, it had an impact on the acceptance of real world. It has shown us the path, both in terms of what we can do and where we need to do more.
Mr. Anirban, what would you like to add to that?
Sure, thank you. No, I totally agree with what Dr. Mukesh said, and I'll try to kind of substantiate that what he said with some data and some examples. So US FDA is one of the regulatory agencies who actually is in the forefront in terms of using real world data for regulatory approval of products. So far US FDA, as far as my knowledge goes, they have approved 13 drugs based on real world evidence data. Now this is, as Dr. Mukesh said, it is not purely on real world evidence. It's like a controlled, 1 or 2 controlled clinical trials substantiated by real world evidence data. So between 1995 and 1997, there were 19.4% of the FDA approval came from this modality. Whereas between 2015 and 2017, so this is again pre-COVID, between 2015 and 2017, this figure went up to 47%. That is 47% of the approvals by US FDA around, came from real world evidence data, supplemented with basically, I mean the controlled clinical trial data supplemented with real world evidence data. So I give you some examples of the recent drugs which have been approved by US FDA. One is petromanid for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, Lutathera for neuroendocrine tumor of the gut, and very famous the Zolgensma for spinal muscular atrophy. And this is very interesting. What they did is because it's a rare disease, so the controlled clinical trial had 21 patients, and they actually compared the result of the phase 3 trial with the available natural history data. So I think this is actually paving a path, in which the future regulations would actually, this is how probably the real world data can be used. India so far has, we do not have any kind of regulatory framework, but Indian Society for Clinical Research is actually working along with the key stakeholder to come up with some kind of a framework. But what I think I would exercise, I would say I have a cautious optimism that this would become a norm in time to come, especially with the help, because of the COVID, this would get a more traction in the future to use real world evidence data for making regulatory decisions on product approvals.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Mr. Anirban. Over to you, Dr. Ayaaz. What are your comments on this question?
Absolutely. I think I fully agree with Anirban and Dr. Mukesh on this real-world evidence data. I would say that, of course, we also had some experience around this during the COVID-19 pandemic itself. So you would have probably followed the news on 2DG. So that's one other, therapeutic indication which actually came in, and we were fortunate to work on those, studies. And this again, as told by Dr. Mukesh and Anirban, that this was not a new, treatment per se or something that was discovered, right across. But of course, it was there, and then we were trying to, bring this indication to it, and we were able to, get the evidence coming out from the, sachets that was provided to the healthcare practitioners, and when we are able to see that data coming in, and that really supported in terms of its approval. So definitely, I fully concur with these thoughts that real world evidence is picking up, as the statistics rightly provided by Anirban. We can see that there's an increase in that in terms of approvals. But that does not mean that clinical trials is going to go away. Clinical trials is going to stay. And in a way, actually, both will go, complementary. I think both will, support each other in terms of, approvals.
Absolutely.
And that's my thought. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ayaaz. So going on to the next question, what was the role of technology, especially digital and analytics, that helped in decentralized trials, remote monitoring, automation, and collaboration to perform effective clinical trials? I would like to start with Mr. Anirban.
Sure. No, thank you for the question. And I think this is the decentralized clinical trials is the recent buzzword. And so this is basically a recent, reconceptualization of the research design, that embodies a patient-centric mindset. So technologies such as digital applications and remote sensors primarily are used to collect patient data. So traditionally what happened was patients had to come to the central trial site, whereas with this decentralization coming in, and I think don't look at it from only India centric perspective, but if you look at in the global perspective, wherever decentralization is basically being implemented, what is happening is a patient and the patients visit to the trial sites are reduced. So now you are using either e-consents, we are using electronic electronic health records, we are using wearables, like, what you call patient reported outcomes, telemedicine, all these are actually helping in the decentralization of clinical trials. Now, what it means for India, and that is why this is totally my personal thought, is that, decentralized, clinical trials today, if you look at, are conducted primarily in the urban localities. But if you look at the major population, India still resides within the semi-rural and rural, areas. But can rural population participate in clinical trial? If they have to probably come to a city like Delhi or Calcutta or Mumbai and stay there and participate in clinical trial. This is very aspirational, that these cities actually, which are digitally powered, can extend this unique opportunity to those participants or patients who actually live in the semi-rural and rural areas to participate in clinical trial, because because they don't need to travel to the sites. Now, somebody asked me that, what about the internet, because this entire thing runs on the net. Now, what about the internet access? But I read somewhere that in the next few years, there would be more internet users in the rural areas as compared to the urban areas. And if that is so, then why these decentralized clinical trials cannot actually become more inclusive to get those patients who otherwise cannot participate in clinical trial and get access to medicines very early to get their disease treated. So that's my thought around this.
Very good point raised, Mr. Anirban. I'd like to go to Mr. Mark for his views on the question.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Rashmi, and I fully agree with the great comments made by the colleagues here. I think in terms of decentralized trials, we see that significant trend. We all see it due to COVID-19. We also need to define what it actually means. I think there's different types of decentralized trials, as defined, for example, by Jacob Laporte from Novartis, who talks about augmented trials, local sites that run trials, or central sites, or maybe like the Apple Heart trial that is directly going to the consumers with the Apple Watches. There were some questions about that in the Q&A. And what is important to know, it's about patient experience, and it's about technology helping to drive the randomized clinical trial. That is not going away. That is key. The principles are there, but it's getting easier with technology. And that's what we see as well. We see the needs for clinical trial operations staff, for clinicians, for everyone involved to use technology in an integrated fashion, to drive automation, collaboration together with statisticians wherever they're sitting around the world in this COVID pandemic, right? Because traveling was very much down. It's also about offering a robust and regulatory qualified runtime environment. And when you look at it, I agree with the comments on real-world evidence and randomized clinical trials. They're supportive of each other. It's not choosing, but it's really supportive and being able to combine those types of information and drive insights that are meaningful for the clinical trial conduct, and then for the evidence package that needs to be submitted to the regulators. What we see in the increased adoption for a solution like, for example, SAS Life Science Analytics Framework, is the ability to combine it also with real-world data, AI, machine learning, looking at computer vision, digital biomarkers. That's all part of decentralized trials. And I want to emphasize that this is not for free. Technology by itself will never solve everything that needs to be done. It's about clinical knowledge, and it's about really having the ability and offering clinicians and researchers the ability to look at exploratory biomarkers, to evolve them, to mature them, to make it easier for patients. So it's really a journey where looking at data quality, looking at master protocols like the recovery trial during COVID-19 play important roles. And by bringing those systems together so that that digitization, bringing it to the cloud is helpful. So these are some of the elements that we see. And I want to highlight that global regulators are also, just the day before yesterday, I think more than 40 regulatory agencies around the world emphasized the need for real-world evidence to really use the same data standards as randomized clinical trials, a need for the analytical rigor and robustness behind it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Dr. Ravi, your views?
Yeah, actually, decentralized trials, I can say they are required, no doubt in it. But how does it really help on understanding from two facets? One is the data which is got accumulated with the help of digitalized platforms, and how is it able to make a very remotely living human or suffering patient able to really, get all the well-equipped kind of medication care at their places. That's most important, which as Dr. Chowdhury also mentioned about the remote villages, especially in a country like India, what we need to see, how we can get them really acquainted and acquired the right kind of therapy, which is available in tertiary hospitals in big cities. That's one point which I wish to see slowly. Definitely, this decentralized procedures would bring more named patients into the system, and the data would be more humongous. But analytics tools, which even including SAS, working on that kind of tools, helping the sponsors or biometric the data which comes out of the patient's devices need to be really put forth and see that how best these trials would help to improve the care at the patient level in their spots, in their villages, in their residences. That's most important, because I see the kind of trials that we are doing in India. At least I want to focus more on India. We have a lot of opportunity here, because peripherally and certain places in cities in central India are able to really do map well for the disease abundance and disease burden and the way that it needs to get participated, transformed them into study participants in the CT studies. But are they well equipped with the currently? No, they are not well equipped with the IT tools and devices and the operational knowledge and many of other aspects connected with the patient's participation. Because here I see this is a decentralized the CT studies. When we say it is for patient-centric possibilities, that what we need to work on. So there we still need to improve, and I believe that there are very, very good benefits, and for sure we can really improve our population abundantly to follow and make themselves to be available for the study participation, and even for the hospitals. The treating physicians remotely can really look at the health status through their data that collected out of these devices at home for patients, and make the benefit of the giving the remedies and the therapies, so that at least not just about, I'm talking about 50% of the clinical trials which can really doing, which can be on par with the kind of any advanced markets in the globe. But at the same time, I want to see more than 85% of the trials to really get these benefits, because that's most important to catch hold of naive patients and get their more data, and their analytics would definitely give very good lot of interpretations, and especially for the benefit of the humankind. So there is a very primary goal which one has to keep is how best we can go to first 1 tier cities to 2 tier or 3 tier or 4 to 6 tier villages as well, to take these therapies, to take these patients' sufferings being treated well with a lot of information which we could also get, and this will help. Like what I could see in tertiary hospitals, or they conduct clinico-pathological meetings every week, and they conduct the continuity of the medical education. So they know everything what's happening for their patients who are treated in their hospitals. But where is the collective information available, except a few interesting case studies come in the journals? Other than that, I don't see too much of case studies coming out of the either treatments given by the tertiary hospitals or to that matter by any doctor, GP level in any city or town. So I feel the benefits should be the fruits of this BC studies should bring a total platform of making the patient suffering lessen and making the physicians more effective to treat in the locations where they were located, especially remotely. And a lot of acceleration is possible based on the patient recruitment when we know the disease pattern and its abundance in the locations given, which is also equally more important for any type of study. Because I know one of our organizations, friends organizations, I can say, because I'm part of it. So I know how these cancer therapies started going to nook and corner of the country. That's most important because, first of all, prevention is better than cure. When we say, at least there should be models, there should be some preventive opportunities and measures that need to be taken should be reached to the nook and corner of the country. Because the rural country population who are not well exposed to the right therapies and the right opportunities to understand, and the life loss is huge there. So we need to really see how best oncotherapies go and reach to the common man. So how best we can really improve the RCTs or decentralized programs for benefiting with the tools that come out and make these to happen. So participation and delivery, that's important because the study patient participation as well as the delivery of the care is important, and how best we can transform these patients to become more knowledgeable, to be part of the studies and to be part of the continuity of the therapies. Because the treatment suddenly they stop because of the one is they are away from the site, or one is two is they are not able to really receive the IPs or any treatment opportunities in the given location like villages, you can say. So I think we are gathering a lot of information, but we are unable to really disseminate and see how best we can improve the patient care. That's important with these studies, which I feel there is a huge opportunity, and this is the benefit of decentralized city studies. Would definitely equip the local doctors and local GPs and make the patients aware. And because as already my eminent other colleagues already said about the opportunities available with IoT, AI based and other device driven technologies, and a lot of use data analytic systems that prevail through the different service providers, including SAS.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. I'll get back to you. We would have to take this next question. The question is for Mr. Sumit. How effective do you think are integrated cloud-based methods in protected clinical trial data sharing?
Yeah, so thanks. I think most of my fellow panelists have already, I think, given a lot of in terms of what has happened in the last 2-3 years. So I think in response to this question, so I would say in the recent years, like breakthrough technologies have advanced the clinical trials exponentially, and the trial landscape is undergoing rapid change as we are decentralizing the clinical trial, and it includes more of the remote elements. I think like the fellow panelists have shared. So I think cloud-based methods are definitely very, very effective to enable this massive landscape change. In terms of, I would say on the economic piece, definitely this would reduce the cost. It will give you cost flexibility. And from an operational perspective, I would say this would give you scalability, ability to adjust to demand rapidly. And also it offers better security and privacy because the data centers given by the cloud service providers are mostly secure and well protected. And also, I would say in terms of the access control, the access logging, I think those type of operational controls would be much more effective if we move to a cloud-based service provider. I think so. This was the first part. Few of the considerations which I feel are quite critical. I would say there are 4 considerations. First one, privacy and security. I think when we, have an agreement, so there should be a detailed provision to include a requirement for security, confidentiality, privacy, the traceability of access, reversibility of data, and the long-term preservation. Second one, I would say on the regulation and compliance, because the cloud service providers should address all the legal, regulatory, and the accreditation requirement, and also specific to some country regulations, I think they need to adhere to. Third piece, I would say on the service reliability, because that's quite critical. The SLAs, because everything is on cloud, the disaster recovery, if something goes down, and also on the change management, because I think that's quite critical. And the fourth piece, which is on the data portability and interoperability within different cloud service providers, various platforms. I think these would be the four specific considerations in terms of moving to a cloud-based thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sumit. Thank you, Mr. Mark. What would you like to add to that question?
Yeah, I think I want to add a couple of points on the clinical trial data sharing in specific. I think cloud has really been excellent to ensure that we can share data much faster in a more cost-effective way, that we can kind of standardize the access models, and that there is trust both with technology teams and with clinicians and the operational teams that access it. I think in terms of data privacy, we can install better protocols. Again, part of it is technology, part of it is hidden in how we manage that data, the processes, the people accessing it. But the big problem of healthcare is fragmentation, right? If only we would have access to these clinical systems, hospital systems to drive clinical trials, it would be better. And there is a real opportunity, I think, for cloud to link up systems and do that in a trusted way. I see the increasing use of trusted research environments where pharmaceutical sponsors are working with hospitals in a trusted, secured environment so that they can share information without really harming the patient privacy or anything that would destroy that trust. I see it also in federated analysis. I see it in qualified clinical environments that are broad, that give good results. But also post-approval, you see explosion of clinical data sharing, such as the clinical data study requests, clinical trial data sharing, but also projects like the UK Biobank, the US, all of the US, the Healthy Nevada, the genomics data that is being shared, the biological data that is being shared, and finally, integration of multi-omics data, real-world data, digital biomarkers. All of those aspects help enormously. So it has had a massive impact, and it has allowed, for example, us analytical providers and analytical technologies to standardize the way we deploy that and make it more effective to do it in a global way, whether users are in Asia, India, whether they're in Europe, in the US, it is much easier to standardize that.
So, Mark, my next question is also to you. Given the evolution of cloud and analytics in clinical research processes, how do you think it will shape the future of clinical trials?
Yeah, here we come to the crystal ball element, right? To looking at the future and the trends. But I envision a future for clinical trials where we can change the patient experience. And I think the colleagues have mentioned it. Why are we running these clinical trials? It's to improve the quality of the patient. And by bringing the clinical trial closer to the patient and closer to the clinician, we can offer more choices to the patient. We can also be more inclusive to different patient populations. And I think technology, in a sense, and analytics can help do that. We can show to regulators, to the public, what patients we are including in the clinical trial and why. And both in a scientific sense, but also in an ethical and in sense to ensure that we include everyone and that everyone has the ability to have access to the latest therapies. So lowering the threshold is the true value of technology. We can have more global trials, inclusive of not just running trials in the US, in Europe, India, China, but all of the trials, all of the globe can collaborate because we can have more standard protocols as well. Easier protocols, probably master protocols. A lot of organizations are studying that, like Transcelerate and CDISC. Talking about CDISC, these are great initiatives that help us to drive more interoperability at the level of standards, both for real-world evidence, randomized clinical trials, and having technology that deals with that is important. And if you look at analytics and AI machine learning, we are working hard on, for example, unstructured data analysis, using what physicians are writing down in terms of notes, using adverse event information and picking that up easier to drive more safety of these trials. Or, for example, looking at labeling and repurposing new compounds that are already approved for one indication, but seeing if they would be valid for new challenges that we will deal with, pandemics that are coming. Like I saw some questions on monkeypox and the new challenges that undoubtedly will come in the coming years, and be faster and do less sequential but more parallel clinical trials will all be needed. And finally, very passionate about that real-world evidence topic, making sure that we can access that information that is enormous in terms of volumes, in terms of modalities of the data, but also continuously look at that, be faster on the ball if you want to look at the data, continuous data monitoring, and looking at synthetic control arms as well, to speed up and design the right trials, not to waste time on statistically underpowered trials, but really making sure that we run the right trials. Again, referring to COVID and that recovery, that famous recovery trial, and the ability to magically find remdesivir as an effective compound is because we had enough patients in those trials and the right technology installing it. So this is, in a short whirlwind tour, what I see as the future of clinical trials. All of us collaborating, technologists, clinicians, pharmaceutical companies, regulators, all of the actors collaborating for the same purpose.
Thank you, Mark. Sumit, would you like to add any comments to that?
No, I think Mark already covered, Rashmi. So I think broadly, if I have to see, definitely the outlook is definitely promising. There is no doubt about it. And I think there's some approaches, like whenever we go for a new technology or a tool, we should not leap onto the latest technology. We should think it strategically. I think the second one, I would say, again, harmonizing in terms of standardizing your data capture, upgrading the old data, and also giving the architecture. I think one of the panelists covered this in the earlier discussion. And also data safety, which is quite critical against poor data practices, unauthorized access, use, and creating a culture of innovation. I think the human factor is quite critical, whether cloud analytics. So I think so in terms of how do you manage that resistance to change, the mindset, I think these would be some additional, I would say, pointers to like what Mark shared. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Sumit. Well, that was a very knowledgeable discussion, and we are really running out of time. So we'll quickly take a few questions that we received from our attendees. The first question is, have you made any investments to speed up your clinical research processes? And if so, what role do you think pre-built analytic models or automated machine learning solutions play to improve your business outcomes? I'd like to start with Mr. Anirban.
Sure. I think this is not something which has happened in the recent times, but I think if you look at starting from site selection to patient recruitment, I think, everything is based on analytics at this point in time. And even if I look at remote monitoring or risk-based monitoring, which actually, reduces the number of monitoring visits or make monitoring visits much more focused. Again, that is also based on analytics. So I think this has been going on for a while now, and I think this would further get better traction in times to come.
Would any of the other speakers want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Rashmi, maybe I can just reiterate that the proprietary, tool that we use, in our organization, means, as I mentioned, means it is a combination of both, machine learning and artificial intelligence. So that really helps us in terms of picking up the right tunes, means which actually come out from the trials, means as we run this across in the industry. But I also like to add, which I missed, when Mark nicely summarized, means in terms of the cloud-based technologies. We should also make a note that the Apple Watch, which is already approved, means it helps in terms of picking up the irregular heartbeats. It's something that is actually what we're talking about. It's actually now being coming in terms of use. We have several other technologies, means which from the cloud point of view as well, as Sumit was also covering, which can be something which the sensors means which can actually pick up from the sweat. I mean the electrolytes means or glucose or various other elements. I mean which can become very handy in terms of operating these trials. Yeah, so there's a lot for the future ahead means in terms of clinical trials and especially using the cloud means as a big tool. The summary I liked the way Mark put it. I mean, if we all work together and then in terms of putting everything to its best, I think that's where we should be.
Quickly going on to the next question, what is the outlook the pharma companies take to establish real-world evidence as part of drug development process? The question can be taken by Mr. Mukesh.
So I think, so real-world evidence is what we can do. So one is that, what we are doing with the real-world evidence. So primarily right now, the real-world evidence is being used in the maybe post-marketing surveillance, right? This is one. It has not really well established in drug development approval process, right? So what we need to do is, one is that we need to work with the regulators to really have, for the development approved, I would say, approved decisions, right, or strategies or endpoints and the methods. This is one approved protocol, I would say. Second is, I think internally we need to build our team, and also we need to build the partners. When you say in the teams, I think I mentioned to you that the controlled clinical trial and the registry, they are different ballgame, right? Epidemiology studies. We need to develop partners in terms of the technology companies, which can really help us in getting data collected. And also as I mentioned, in some country like Israel and UK, we have got very good system. They can collect the data very, very well. If you want to do that in India, I think we are not yet there, if you want to really use the real world data. So maybe the companies need to work with the government and the hospital industry also, that they have the right records which can be trusted, which can be audited, and which are real and accurate. So maybe these are the 4 or 5 points probably we need to do in the next few years, if you want to use the real world data.
If I can add to that, I mean, just to again substantiate, see, at Bharat Serums, we are actually doing a real-world prospective study on Rh negative pregnancies. We fondly call it the rhythm study. So what we are doing, we are actually recruiting 20,000 mothers who are Rh negative mothers who are giving birth to Rh positive babies, just to study the natural history. So this is not for any drug development or anything at this. It is a totally a non-commercial trial. But our aspiration is that tomorrow, this will help. Basically, this will create a good set of real-world data. If anybody wants to develop any drug in this domain, then this data on natural history on this population would help in faster development of product in the future. So this is how probably pharma companies are actually addressing. I mean, I can give one example what we are handling at this point in time.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Anirban. As we're running out of time, we won't be able to take more questions. But thank you so much for sharing such meaningful insights. And I really appreciate all experts for joining us today. A big thank you to all attendees as well. Thank you so much, and please take care.
Thank you.